Thank you for calling the Astrological Commission Podcast. This is your host, Issachar Bey, and we're here today with Wade Caves. He's somebody who I believe is one of the is a great astrologer, and I believe he's one of the astrologers who I think is pushing the needle and putting astrology really on the forefront. I think he's extremely brilliant, and I think the world needs to know who he is if they have not already. And I've been following him for a while. I actually got the opportunity to finally meet him last year in London, and I just think he's brilliant. I've always said that what I love about astrologers is their approach to astrology, their approach on how they will begin to delineate, how they will begin to look at things, the natal chart, to look at things, and their approach to things. And I just think that his approach to astrology is extremely brilliant, and I do love his concepts. I had a chance to sit in one of his lectures live, and it's phenomenal. He does the great slides, very laid out very well. And then what I love too is that for the novice, for somebody who's just coming to astrology, the way that he simplifies it and makes it so simple for you to understand, I think it's not everybody has that gift. And so I wanted to sit down and talk with him today and basically just talk to him about his journey through astrology. So we want to welcome our guest, Wade. How you doing?
Hey, Issachar, thank you so much for that really lovely introduction. I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing good. Explain to me, how did you first get introduced into astrology?
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. Before I do, I just want to say a quick note that, all the things that you said in that opening introduction were very kind and very touching. I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am today in terms of my teaching style, my style of practice, without the lineage that I have followed. So I do want to quickly say that so much of what I do, I learned from Deborah Holding, who's the principal and founder of the School of Traditional Astrology and the founder of skyscript.co.uk, a wonderful website dedicated to the study of astrology. So my history with astrology, it started as kind of just a bit of a hobby, as I think for a lot of people it does. My family was in the military, so like we moved every few years, and then on top of that, my parents were divorced, and their custody arrangement was that I would spend 1 year with my dad, 1 year with my mom, and so I went back and forth every year for my upbringing since I was 5 years old. And what that typically meant was that every time I was moving every year, I'd start a new school year, and I would almost always be in a different school with different people. By the time I was in 10th grade, to give you some clarity on what I mean, by the time I was in 10th grade, I'd been in 13 different schools. So I had to learn really quickly how to, integrate myself and to make friends with the knowledge that, I may not see them after that year. When I was in sixth grade, so I don't know how old you are around that time, maybe like 12 or something like this. When I was in sixth grade, I lived in California, and Sailor Moon was huge. I was in a new school, needed to make friends, and everybody was watching Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon and a bunch of anime shows and things like this. And so I started watching those shows. Dragon Ball Z and I never really, we didn't get caught on with each other too much, but I really appreciated and enjoyed the story of Sailor Moon. And in that story, it's based on a Japanese graphic novel or series of graphic novels where young girls find that they have been reincarnated as reincarnations of previous warriors that carried, powers from different planets. So there was Sailor Mars, who had the power of fire and pyromancy, and Sailor Jupiter, who had the power of thunder and lightning. And so it was kind of fun to engage with the mythology that gets kind of plugged into a story like this. But mostly I was into Sailor Moon because everyone around me was. It was the same thing with Pokemon. I got into Pokemon around maybe the year before just to make friends. Well, when I moved the next year in my seventh grade year, there wasn't really anybody that I was finding that was watching Sailor Moon or playing Pokemon or watching Dragon Ball Z. But I did get into a group of friends who they all had eclectic interests of some kind. Somebody was into Nordic folk music, one person was into writing vampire novels. So they all had something that was a little bit off the beaten path. And I remember going over to one of their houses, and there was a book on the shelf about astrology. I saw the planet Mars and Venus and Jupiter, I think, and Saturn probably was on the spine as well. And I thought, okay, I have a head start here. I don't know what astrology is, but because I've been watching Sailor Moon now for the last year and a half, I know Mars equals fire, Venus equals beauty, Jupiter equals thunder and lightning. So I began to have a little bit of, a starting position with this particular subject. And so I picked it up, and honestly, that's how it started. It was just something to fit in, which maybe a lot of astrologers don't pick up astrology to fit in, but that was my path. I almost dropped it in college because it just seemed like, I needed to kind of get serious, and it seemed to not really. I hadn't had any formal training either. Everything I knew was just collecting little bits and pieces here and there off the internet, and these books that I find in Barnes and Noble. And at best, my learning was very fragmented. But I decided to pursue a course of study into natal astrology with the Mayo School of Astrology and had an excellent time there. I studied under the principal Wendy Stacy and got the first building blocks of my astrological learning done there. And then Wendy introduced me to Deb Holding at UAC 2012 in New Orleans. And I'd already been aware of Deb at that time because I had maybe sometime that year, a few months earlier, came across SkyScript. And there I learned about horary astrology. And for your listeners who might not know, this is a form of astrology where we are engaging with problems and dilemmas, situations, questions, things, specific definable problems that need resolution. It could be anything from something's gone missing, or a person has gone missing, or, will I be able to close out this transaction profitably? Is this relationship going somewhere? I mean, there's a wide field of things that can be brought to horary analysis. When I found horary on SkyScript, and that was exactly where I found it, there's so many wonderful articles and example judgments on SkyScript's website from a number of astrologers. And I thought, wow, there is a level of specificity that's happening with this technique that I really want to grow more comfortable with. I want to deepen in this. I want to learn what this is about. It feels like magic. I was absolutely floored. I think somewhere in my gut, I believed that there should be a type of astrology. If astrology could do anything, it should also be able to help us solve specific problems down to a level of detail where we can actually tangibly relate to what's going on. So it's not woolly abstractions about necessarily about lifelong personality themes or anything like that. I mean, talking about specific things in a situation. You are too hot-headed right now in this particular transaction. You're not going to get the upper end of the deal unless you relax. That might be somebody signified by Mars, or somebody signified by the moon, might be somebody who is paying attention to gossip too much, constantly changing their opinion, letting emotion ride their discussions. So it felt like I was starting to step into something that could be really experiential, and I could learn on the moment. This is a chart that exists for a specific situation rather than something that a birth chart has to live our whole lives, right? So, my birth chart's the same as it was when I was 5, but horary charts, they change with every situation, and so there's a different model that you get to experience. So anyway, I at UAC met Deborah, went to one of the workshops, and then saved up over the next year to fly out to London in 2013 to take the STA, or School of Traditional Astrology's practitioner's level horary astrology program. and I studied horary over 2 weekends, and it was a very intensive process. And then over the next few years, just continued to double down, study, read, and slowly begin to teach the things that I had some knowledge of. And so that's how I kind of got into that part of my world. But that's pretty much it. I mean, astrology started as something to fit in, and then it stayed in my life long enough that I found a way to really re-engage with it meaningfully in my early 20s.
That's phenomenal, man. I didn't actually know that you went to Mayo. I talked to Leanne, and I know she went there, but that's phenomenal, man.
Yeah,
And then being that Wendy and all of them are there. Wendy is a phenomenal. We're gonna get her on here too and talk to her as well.
you've
But
got to. Yeah.
I want to know, how was it working? Because I believe Deborah Holding is one of the greatest astrologers to ever walk the earth. So, you know, my teacher I always had her books. I had the houses of the sky. What is it?
Yeah, the temples, the houses, temples of the sky.
Temples of the
Hmm.
Sky. So I had all of her books. I know because my teacher at the time, I was starting to get into Uranian, and he was pulling me. He was like, "Listen, Lee Lehman, Deborah Holden, these are the people that you need to
Mm.
study." Project Hindsight. He was trying to get me into all of that stuff, and but he was a Deborah Holden fanatic. So I was, knew about her, had all her books and everything. So when I met her, it was an honor. I've always felt that she was one of the greatest, one of
Yeah.
the greats. How was it working with her, and how was it having her pour into you her knowledge, her wisdom, and then you kind of refining it and putting your own kind of twist on it and your own kind of mend on it?
I love that you've asked me this question. I don't think I've ever been asked to speak on that before, and I have a lot to say on it now that you've asked. Um, I also think that Deborah Holding, I do believe that she is the most gifted astrologer that I'll meet in my life. She can do far more with astrology than she does. She uh, has over many decades, learned a lot about her relationship to her practice and has experimented with, taking things in different directions and learned and has now brought herself into a place where, she's engaging with the parts of astrology that she enjoys. So I guess what I mean to say by this is that there's a lot of work that she has and can do that the public doesn't really get to see. But working so closely with her, we talk about these things relatively frequently. So I met Deborah at the 2012 UAC conference in New Orleans through a workshop. And I think I took to her immediately because, similar to Wendy, I just felt a really good maternal vibe about both of these women. As kind of part of, the signatures, you can tell that they have a nurturing personality behind them. Uh, Deborah's also got, she's a Taurus. She can be a bit of a, she's got the bull symbolism in there. She's got a very dry wit, quick sense of humor, and uh, studying in that workshop. So this was just like a post-conference workshop. I don't remember most of it. I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments in life where you're just absolutely in a state of joy and bliss. And so you can't really remember what happened. It was like you weren't there in a way.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how that workshop was for me. I don't remember much of anything. I remember venturing an opinion every now and again and getting things wrong more often than I would like. But she said that I was in the front row and I was half off my seat the entire presentation, and that if her energies were flagging, she would just look over at me like I was just this excited little golden retriever in the corner, which just like lift her spirits a bit. A year later, we stayed in loose contact after that. I mean, she was working and developing the SkyScript website and really only coming back into astrology herself. She'd taken a break for a few years. And then she was going to be teaching in London a year after I met her. So I read her book. I consumed as much as I could from SkyScript's website. I was just taking information from anywhere, and then went to this training that was 2 weekends long, about 40 hours worth of training, and it's really just enough to like teach you what you need to know, but you're not deep in any of it at that stage. Like you have what you need to actually study after that point. It's like there's still so, but that's the nature of live courses, especially intensive. You get a broad survey and then you have to kind of go back, revisit, and study. And so I continued on my mentorship with Deborah after that course, and yeah, it has been a really wonderful, relationship. I've learned an incredible amount. She has, it's interesting you're asking like the wisdom that she has and what was it like, kind of taking that in. And I got to tell you, some of the wisdom that she has, it was inaccessible to me. Some of it still is inaccessible to me because so much of what I think makes an astrologer are the components of their lives that they're really engaging with. Um, she's uh, she's a mother. I'm not a mother. There's a certain level of understanding about life and death and growth and creation and nurturing and training and discipline. There's a whole world in parenthood that, as somebody who's not had children, I don't know. Some of the internally, I don't know it the same way that a parent would. I think parents make fantastic astrologers because of the wider range, of experience that they've had as a result. So that's very different from my life. And so some of the points that really came very naturally to her were slower for me to be able to understand and to adapt. Um, she's a coal miner's daughter. Her, family has incredible stories in history, dealing with all sorts of economic hardship and difficulty and responding to how the government is responding to these. Like if you read into the miners' crisis in the early 90s in the UK, I mean, you'll get something of a picture of like how severe this was. I was raised in a family that was definitely in the, below poverty level income, but I didn't have that kind of experience. It was very different from mine growing up. And so I just think that what's been really fascinating over time is to not only learn astrology, but also learn how our experience shape how we understand astrology. And I think Deborah does a really good job of kind of helping identify where certain perspectives, for instance, are informed by this experience that she had or that experience that she had. So for me in my life and kind of adapting this, what, has, I think, happened over time is a real deepening in who I am, and learning what is it that I uniquely bring to the table, what are my strengths, where are the places where I have a brilliance or, kind of connection to something that is just my unique thing. Everywhere else, I'm all dusty and tattered and beaten up, but there's got to be somewhere in me that's shining, right? So you want to look for that. And what I've learned over time is that I think my strength is in teaching. I think my strength is in explaining concepts, and then moving quickly from, between different charts and different subject matters, which has helped me in some applications of astrology, like the work I do in mundane astrology. I seem to um, really enjoy, kind of flipping between birth charts, event charts, national charts, and doing these all at the same time. It can be a bit dizzying, I think, for others to watch, but for me, it's like a light show. I really enjoy it. So there's, a lot that I've taken from my teachers that in many ways, the older I get, the more I find that most of the work I'm doing now is kind of finding my own voice and my own space and where, I want to land and figuring that out. Deborah has been my longest working relationship that I have ever had. We started working together in 2015. It's been almost a decade. So next year in October will be a decade of me teaching for the STA and working alongside her on the horary program that she has developed. But now, see, I took it over a 2 weekend intensive, and those intensives are still given around the world occasionally. But now the course has been, significantly extended, and there's been a lot of investment that's gone into it. And so now it's taught over 20 weeks. And so I think students now leave with a much deeper appreciation for the material, and it's probably because you get a week in between sessions, you get time to let things digest. Um, but yeah, I think what I would say is that it teaches you a lot working with somebody for that time, where you're both, working towards, in many respects, the same ends, but you've got different personalities and different points of view. Learned a lot about how our own backstories inform how we work with astrology. It's been a really rewarding partnership. She's one of my best friends. So, and she was excited to hear that I was speaking with you today. She's a big fan. So, um, I'm sure she would want me to extend a hello if she knew she was being talked about so much.
Oh yeah, she's definitely going to hear this.
That's great.
I've always, like I said, I feel like you're a brilliant astrologer. I love your approach to astrology, the way that you simplify it. Just, when I took your lecture and we were talking about just some of the way that you were able to explain the concepts to teach how you would come up with these, these different outcomes and so forth. And I think it's just phenomenal. You just had a big summit that I think was phenomenal. Tell us about the summit, and tell us, about, I'm pretty sure this is gonna be a yearly thing. I don't know if it's gonna be a yearly thing, but tell us about the summit, and how you were able to bring all these astrologers from all over the world together. And I just thought that was so phenomenal.
Okay, yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. So, for the last couple of years, I've been probably since 2016, I've been dipping my toe in and out of working with mundane astrology. I don't really want to be a type of astrologer that's like focused on one thing. Sometimes I just want to go out and do matchmaking for a year. I dream of that sometimes, like just completely changing gears for a little while. I like, a little bit of change in my routine, but um, mundane astrology is one of those things like, there's a big event that happens out there in the world. I might get sucked into this for a reason I might not even be able to explain. Like, why did this story capture me, but this one over here that's significantly more important didn't? And I think that's a whole other type of discussion about how these things kind of find us. But I started to develop a system for working in mundane astrology that was deeply informed by what I learned in the STA's horror course, and the ways in which radicality extends across multiple branches of astrology. Just to clarify, what I mean by that is when we talk about radicality, we're talking about this idea that things are connected with one another, and ultimately, if you trace those connections, they come down to a root, a moment that is, in one way or another, the kind of the source or where everything else is born out of. And the STA woke me up to this as a principle, and it has been perhaps the most influential element in my developing spirituality, but also my astrological practices, to spend time on that theme. So I would work, with mundane astrology, finding an event. So say, for instance, there was, this is an example I wrote about, that there was a data breach that happened in Ireland, and the police were involved. It was like the police, the Metropolitan Police, had the breach themselves, and so there was a lot of details, very private details about its own workforce that were released out into the public, which is a very scary thing when you think about it. And so I looked at the chart for when that happened, and I looked at the newer full moon that happened before it, and I looked at the birth chart of I don't remember what his rank was, but he was the face of this, kind of fiasco, and how his personal birth chart astrology featured into the moment. So I started building a little bit of work doing this, and in the process of doing that, I kind of thought, when I go to conferences, I'm not sure that I feel like there's a true investment in world astrology, mundane astrology, event astrology, political astrology. It feels like kind of an afterthought. I think that natal astrology gets a lot of attention. Predictive and forecasting astrology does too. I understand the market is quite big for personality analysis and future predicting, so I get that. But I just thought, I think there's room for, a way to kind of shake this up. And I also feel like we now are at a time where virtual presentations can be a feature and not this, unfortunate kind of backup. It's something that you can kind of build in. So I worked to develop over the course of a few months a program that was focused on mundane astrology, a 2-day program that I hosted in partnership with the School of Traditional Astrology. The first one has gone through the STA, and all preceding ones will go through in connection with SkyScript and the STA. But I developed a conference program that was entirely virtual, 2 days, like a Saturday and a Sunday. And the idea was that on each of these, on like the Saturday, for instance, we might talk about general themes in world astrology. So maybe somebody wants to talk about, trends in global religion. So somebody might discuss that. Somebody might want to talk about how sunspots affect financial markets. Somebody might want to talk about, I've delivered a presentation with 2 women from Kenya about the World Bank and structural adjustment programs in Africa and the way in which that has damaged or really, kind of undermined the local economy with the guise of helping it. And there's a ton of astrology associated to that. So we did a presentation on that theme. So that was on Saturday. This is just kind of general broad concepts. And then on the Sunday, I had invited astrologers from all around the world to give a forecast on their nation. So we had people from France, Kenya, Ghana, Argentina, Peru, Germany, the United Kingdom and US, Australia, China. We've had presentations that touch on North Korea and other elements of East Asia. So Turkey also, the idea is to try to see these techniques happen and interact with like what's happening in real time around the world. What are the big issues that are happening in Peru, for instance? What are the big issues that are happening in Spain? What are the big issues happening in France? And what are the astrologers there contending with? What are they talking about? Let's bring them together on a cohesive program so they can share their research and work and also be exposed to what was going on around them. One of the best compliments that we received after launching this program was that people felt like they had gone through a global news debriefing. Like they were engaging with astrology, of course, but they felt like they came out of that 2-day conference experience more informed about what's happening in the world, the good and the, stressing. So it was, I think the first conference went really well. So that was delivered in September 2023. We did one in March of this year, 2024. It will at least happen annually. There is still some question, is it better to do this every 6 months or every 12 months? I'm not really trying to, I like the idea of doing it every 6 months, but I also think it probably is helpful to space these things out. So there's still a question mark on that. But yeah, it's called the World Astrology Summit. And there's information about the summit on skyscript.co.uk/inmundo, INMUNDO /summit.
Yeah, I think it's phenomenal what you guys are doing. I think it's definitely something that needs to be broadcasted. It needs to be, definitely put out because, I mean, it's amazing how you can bring people from all over the world and we can speak one language of astrology. We can speak the same language. And in that language, we can we can define the different areas of the world that we live in and that we're able to look at things from a global perspective. Mundane astrology is absolutely phenomenal. It's one of my favorites. I just think that it's something that needs to be more featured and more looked about. You're absolutely right. You never really have any, when you go to these lectures, there's never really nothing on mundane. There's never really no courses or anything like that. So I think that, you've definitely started something that I believe it's definitely needed. Listen, Wade, you're on the forefront. I think, it's a few of you guys, but you are on the forefront. I think that you are one of the ones that has the ability to push the needle, to push astrology forward and keep it relevant, keep it authentic. And I think that you
Well,
also have
thank you for that.
have
That's
the
really
ability,
thoughtful.
and I think you have the ability to take astrology uh, to places that many of us may have never thought about. To expand it, to break the borders that or the confinements that it may have, and I just think that these things that we're doing may not seem like they're big, but they're actually making a great impact. I mean, especially when you're talking about the World Summit. This is all
Yeah.
over the world, and so I just think that it's absolutely phenomenal what you guys are doing. What I wanted to ask you too
Well,
is when
thank you. I wanted to tell you, but before we say that, I appreciated very much your interview with Bill Meridian. In anticipation of meeting with you, I listened to a couple of different episodes, and I really enjoyed the episode that you had with Bill Meridian. I know there were some audio issues, which is a
yeah
bummer, but the overall, yeah, the overall discussion, I found myself, I was cooking and cleaning and like nodding with Bill Meridian. I was like, yes, that is such a great point. Or, oh, I hadn't considered that before. Or, yes, I agree. I think I just said that last night at dinner. So I was like, this is such a nice thing. And Bill Meridian is a powerhouse, and
yes
truthfully, we don't hear him behind a microphone enough. He is such a huge name. He shows up at the largest conferences, but typically is not at the ones that I'm at. So I've not actually had a chance to meet him in person, but he is definitely one of those people that I look up to. So I enjoyed that. I wanted to say thank you for featuring him on your podcast.
Oh man, Bill Meridian is a powerhouse. He's one of those ones too, man. I mean, anybody who can take astrology and begin to teach us about the stock market and how to make money, and oh man, he's been phenomenal. I've been following him for years, so it was an honor for him
Yeah,
to
yeah.
to do that. What I wanted to know is once you got involved with Deborah Holding and you begin to study with her, and you begin to study her
hmm
Rari and get into the ancient text, who were some of your favorite
hmm
astrologers from the ancient text? Like, was it Dorothy Poseidon? Was it William Lilly? Like, who was your
mm
favorite?
Well, the first one that I fell in love with was William Lilly. And the reason for that is because he wrote a lot. So there's a lot to read from him. He not only wrote his astrological text, Christian Astrology, which is 3 books on astrology. The first two are, when people talk about Christian astrology, they're usually referring for the first two because those two make probably the most comprehensive English language horary course text from the tradition that is traditionally sourced and cited that we have. It's like very thorough and has a lot of really great, and his chart examples are in there. I mean, there's a lot of text out there, but not a lot of chart examples. And he throws in 30 some odd charts and gives full delineations of them. And there's some notes. Sometimes he's got these little lines in there, throwaway lines that you think, oh, this doesn't mean anything, or it's just a little comment. And then years later, when you finally understand the principle and go back and read what he wrote, you go, oh my goodness, that was what he was saying. I had no idea. But I loved reading his almanacs. He had these almanacs that he would write every year, and he would give prognostications for London and Europe and the British monarchy. And he would have this side commentary that I thought was just like, the phrasing was fantastic. And while studying with Deborah, one of the things that I needed to do throughout the course of study was to work on a project related to William Lilly and his life. And so I decided to take his autobiography and read it and annotate it because I was going to write. I mean, you have to, for the master's level horror course that I took through the SCA with Deborah. It's a mentorship program. There is just to be familiar with your sources, there's a project where you write, 1 or 2 pages about this author or this book, or, you can choose. I chose Lilly, and that's what I wanted to do. But to get to understand anything about his life, I wanted to go back and read his autobiography. But Iskak, to be honest with you, I couldn't understand a word of it. He was making reference to like economic, social, political systems that existed in the UK in the 17th century, or England, we should say, in the 17th century. And I didn't know what these were. I think a lot of folks who, were raised in the United Kingdom today would be able to find maybe greater understanding in what Lily was talking about because maybe the phrasing or the names for things haven't changed so much. They still have a parliamentary system, but I was raised in the U.S. Culture is very different. So I took William Lilly's autobiography and just annotated my way through it. If I didn't understand a sentence, I stopped until I did. And I just took notes on everything I was learning as I went. Somebody got word of this. Jen's Arts got word of this. She was at the time with Rubido Press and asked if that could be published. And so I ended up being the annotator and editor of the 300th anniversary edition of William Lilly's autobiography, which is really cool. It was like perfect time to hit the 300-year milestone.
Wow.
But yeah, it was really cool. So I had a very close relationship with Lilly early on because he was just like by choice and also by study, somebody who was, very near and around me. But over time, other authors came forward, and now I think my favorites, Lily's still there, of course, but Manilius, Marcus Manilius from the first century Roman astrologer who wrote the Astronomica, which is an astrological textbook written in prose. So it's a giant poem in Latin, and it's a beautiful text with some incredible insights that I find really powerful. Ptolemy, I think, is probably the most important of the Hellenistic astrologers. He certainly is the most important of Hellenistic astronomers, but I think as astrologers, though, I would also say, the succeeding centuries really were referencing him without stop. So, it's not my opinion. It's just the sheer weight of his reputation that's been seen and the amount of work that's passed on. But I also like reading Ptolemy's work. I like it when the astrologers have a bit of a conversational tone with the reader, and Ptolemy, I think, did a good job of that, both in the Tetrabiblos, but I actually read the Almagest also, not the whole thing. I read the bits that were the text that was around the mathematical components. The Almagest is the text in which Ptolemy laid out the math for a geocentric view of the cosmos that explained why planets retrograde. It helped build the ability to predict the positions of the planets in their orbits. So his work was really influential. I had a good time with it. Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra is a short read, but some of the insights that he shares in his text are so salient and so concise and so well worded. In some places, I just find that he has said something better than I found it anywhere else, and I really love that. Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni is like the coolest dude. This guy, he was a polymath. He had his hand in a little bit of everything. I believe that he actually in the this is like he's 1,000 years ago we're talking about, okay. That he invented, it was like diagrams that he invented scuba gear well before scuba was invented by modern reckoning. I mean, we're talking centuries before. He was just a brilliant mind. He traveled all the way from what we would today call the Middle East and Near East Asia, and would go down to India and come back and report on what he'd learned, and observe that the Indians, as he said, were doing the astronomical math better than anyone that he'd come into contact with, and that was like what he saw as the real center of astronomical education. But when you study anything about Al-Biruni's life, I mean, just the coolest, most everyone knew him, and he knew everybody. He was welcome in so many places, and was highly regarded and well esteemed. So I'm a big fan of Al-Biruni. And then Nicholas Culpeper. So Nicholas Culpeper was an astrologer in the 17th century, contemporary with Lilly, but he had Capricorn moon. I believe he had a Capricorn moon. Maybe it was Capricorn rising, Capricorn sun. Now I've lost myself. I can't remember which it was, but he just has this dry sense of humor. Reading his he kind of questions whether you're smart enough to understand what he's saying as he's explaining it to you. He's like, if you have any brains, you'll get what I'm saying. If you don't, walk away. So, these are the authors that I came to really appreciate, and I find like more or less now everything that I need is there. Bonatti
Mm.
frequently comes up, but I'm not sure that like I love the translations of Bonatti that are available. They feel more cumbersome than necessary. One astrologer that I am certain that I will love is Haley Ibn Rigel. His material has not yet been translated into English, but I feel confident that um, that would be an astrologer whose work I could very, very easily get lost in.
Mm. Yeah, that's very interesting. I know you said earlier that you're really trying to find your lane. You want to get into teaching and so forth. But I also know you have a private practice. So when people come to
Hmm.
you to get a consultation, what are some of the things they can
Hmm.
expect? Can they call you for horary questions? Do they come to you with like what can they expect when they come to you?
Yeah, I mean, I will do whatever is necessary to make sure the client walks away with what they need. For the most part, I just kind of want to know why, like, what are you here to see me for today? And from there, we kind of figure it out. If they come to me and they have a specific situation they can't wrap their head around, a relationship that seems to be foundering, or maybe it's some kind of professional concern, something to do with a property transaction. Those are definable specific situations, and so I'll probably use a horary or consultation chart to guide through that discussion. Some people want to talk about general life themes. They want to understand something about their inherent nature, or their tendencies, just to get maybe a better perspective or a different perspective on something. Uh, Frequently, those will end up being natal consultations. Some people want forecasts or to take a look at their solar return, so that's a different style of natal consultation, but same thing. Some people might be coming looking to find the right time or date to start something, so I help them with that. It's electional astrology. Um, and then some people come to me for tutoring. I just recently uh, added to my services list the interpretation of a child's birth chart. I did this not I did this twice last year. My sister um, had her first uh, child, which was really exciting, and then one of my best friends had her first child, which is exciting. And they were not so far away from each other when they had kids, and so I decided as like a gift, I would do a stylized version of their birth chart, and then write out an interpretation of their birth chart that focused on what are the stories and the motifs that an astrologer would be drawing on looking at this birth chart? So I'm not going in there saying this is a child who's going to do well financially, or this is somebody who's likely to develop kidney issues in their 50s. Nothing like this at all. It's more about let's take a look at this fixed star that's really, very prominent in the chart, or maybe it's a great number of, um, configurations that are developing something of a theme. So it's kind of like telling a story that gets told through the symbolism here. So just as a way to celebrate the birth of a new family member, that ended up being a really meaningful exercise for me. It almost felt like kind of providing a blessing over the child in my own way, to kind of acknowledge the stories that are around this person's astrology at the time that they were born. And so now I have not advertised that I do this, but it is now up on my website, that I am happy to do this for new births around the world. But
Wow.
I think effectively it's kind of like when you go to the doctor, you just like, the doctor's like, what's wrong? Where does it hurt? Just tell me what's up. And you explain to the doctor what's going on, and they reach for the tools that they need to get the job done. That's kind of how I like to practice. I don't want anybody spending too much time trying to decide, do I need this or do I need this? Honestly, just come in, let's talk about what you need, and we'll take it from there. There's no reason to worry. We'll be able to find the tool that will best get at the heart of what you need.
Mm, that sounds very good. Yeah, I know that you and just the way that you're explaining your services, I love the approach. You know, you come to me, you tell me what the issue is, and then I can just go in my bag and grab whatever tools I need to help you fix your problem.
Right.
So, you know, I think that's great. And then also, I like to ask astrologers all the time. You know, when you're doing forecasting, what is your favorite forecasting tool to use, and what tool do you feel works all the time, or it has a great accuracy that you use for your forecasting?
Yeah. Listen, the number one's got to be transits. I mean, I don't think transits gets. Let's try to think about this before I say it, but I feel like when we talk about these things, people always want to say perfection, solar returns, primary directions, and I understand, you know, why you would think about when you think forecasting, you think that. But at the end of the day, the real thing that actually delivers the result, it's the real-time connections to your birth chart, is the transits that are going on at that time. And same thing with the solar return. Solar return, the meaning that's shown behind it gets revealed as it is transited by the motion of planets in in the moment. So for me, transits are number one. If I could get rid of everything else, had to, right? Get rid of everything else and could only keep one other thing, it would be transits first mostly. But beyond that, I mean, I'm a big solar return fan and primary directions fan. But I also find that sometimes less is more. I have done the style of astrology, which is like kitchen sink astrology, where I throw absolutely everything in there, and I've gotten the feedback like, you know, this is almost, too much. You know, it's like we got to figure out how, and you can feel it when it's happening as you're developing, you know, a narrative when you're drawing on too many threads. How do I bring these all together? You can actually feel the struggle to do this. For me, I have instead found it very useful to kind of think about maybe one or two charts, like a birth chart, a solar return chart, transits. Let's just keep it there. If I'm working with somebody, so I have some high-profile clients who, like CEOs, corporate presidents, celebrities, etc., people who have a broader interface with the public than you and I might have, ISAR, for instance. And so with these individuals, whenever we're talking about what's needing to happen out in the public, like a CEO might have to make a really large decision, for instance, or maybe a celebrity needs to decide when they're going to announce a new project, then I will not only look at the birth chart, but I tend to at that stage also layer in the new and full moons that are surrounding the time frames we're looking at. As in the work that I've done in mundane astrology, I can see it pretty consistently, I think, that the new moon or full moon that precedes something happening, it carries the seeds of it, especially the larger the story becomes, the more clearly you can see it. So if you want this to be a big thing, if you want it to be important and for the right reasons, it would be good to make sure that we're finding a newer full moon that has great compatibility with the project and also with your own birth chart. So it just kind of depends on, I think, what the client needs. Very often, new and full moon astrology is not something that the everyday person needs, you know. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, certainly. So now I have to ask you this. You're the mundane guy. Everybody in the world has witnessed this debate we just had with these two candidates. How do you, on the mundane level, what does the United States look like? What does it look like going into this year being an election year, with all of the stuff that we have going on a mundane level? Did you see anything that may have you concerned, or that you are looking at and saying, well, I got my eye on this?
Yeah, there's a few things. I mean, the Aries ingress has a moon-Pluto opposition. The moon's in early Leo, and Pluto's at like 1 degree of Aquarius. I think it's like 3 degrees Leo moon. And that opposition to me is concerning because of the recent things that have happened, I think. So, for instance, the Supreme Court decision to effectively make the king out of a president, you know, and to remove the ability for law to reach the highest office, that there is this kind of immunity creating, it's like king-making in a way. So I think that moon in Leo kind of points to this, but Pluto moving through Pluto moving through Aquarius is much more about decentralizing things. And so this is a conflict that I think is getting seeded to become progressively more straining and challenging. Uranus is going to be going into Gemini before too long. I think everybody who's looked into such things as maybe observation that the U.S. has been at war every time Uranus has moved through Gemini. The reason is that Geminis are seventh cusp if you use the Sidley chart for the United States, and Mars is in Gemini, so Uranus ends up transiting both the descendant and the U.S. Mars, and that can be, quite a challenging thing for anybody to experience on a personal, but also transpersonal and collective level. The Aries ingress for this year centered on DC also had, I think it's 25 degrees Leo on the midheaven. I mean, that kind of configuration where 28, 27, 29-degree Leo on the midheaven also happened in 2016, if I remember correctly. Oh, no, it wasn't that. It was the 2000 Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. That happened at 22 degrees of Taurus, which is on the midheaven. And then that late degree of Leo I was describing, like 28 degrees Leo, that was on the ascendant. And that connects very favorably with Trump's own birth charts because he has the same natal angles, 22 Leo or 24 Taurus, 22 Taurus, 24 Taurus on the midheaven, and then some late degree of Leo on the ascendant. So his birth chart and the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction of 2000, they have the same angles. And the astrology at the time that he was running was also very fiery, very contemptuous, and that really kind of stirred and shake things up. So now when I take a look at the Aries ingress this year, it makes me nervous to see 25 degrees of Leo on the midheaven because that has been historically shown to be a productive degree for Donald Trump. Mars is at 27 degrees of Aquarius, which I believe is on Kamala Harris's Mars as well, but that opposes Trump's Mars. And so these two, kind of get locked into transits with each other. The Mundane Matters group through Skyscript's Patreon, if you're not a subscriber to Skyscript's development group, you should consider subscribing and helping fund the redevelopment of the site and get access to all these cool groups. So there's one called Mundane Matters, where this is all they talk about, is what's going on in the world and the mundane shifts. Somebody in that group, I believe it was either Sheila Rower or maybe it was Drew Philippe, but one of them had mentioned that Mars and Uranus are about to conjoin on Algol, right? So that's going to be around like 25, 26 degrees of Taurus. And that's in square to the Aries ingress Mars and Kamala Harris's Mars and, the midheaven icy axis of the Aries ingress for this year. So I don't think that the rocky path ahead of us is actually like that it's behind us. Like that these transits are still kind of kicking and stirring things up. The astrology is relatively neutral towards Biden. I mean, that Mars-Uranus conjunction that was mentioned at the Mundane Matters group does happen to be in opposition to important planets for Biden in his own birth chart. So it seems like he's vulnerable to attack at this time. Not surprising, the debate performance was lackluster is not the word. It was deeply concerning. And, so now we just got to kind of have to think about what happens next. I'll be very eager to see what happens at the Democratic National Convention in the end of August. Gavin Newsom's birth chart is incredibly lit up. He was the one that I've been watching for a really long time. His Jupiter is at that 25-degree Leo spot that I've been describing. So that is really cool because that puts his natal Jupiter on the Aries ingress midheaven this year. At the time on election day, Jupiter will be on the degree of his midheaven. And in addition to this, there's a lunation that happens right in, like at the start of the Democratic National Convention this year. So that particular lunation is kind of, I think, going to set the theme for what's going on during that discussion. And that lunation is at 27 degrees Aquarius. and the sun is at 27 Leo. So all of that is, again, really picking up Gavin Newsom's chart. So I am interested in seeing, especially after the results that we just saw in France yesterday. I don't know if you've been like listening to what's going on with European elections, but there was a deep concern about how far ahead. There were two rounds of voting. The first round of voting, the far right nationalist party was really, really like concerningly far ahead. It looked like they were going to sweep pretty easily. The second round of voting, literally, the week leading up to the vote, the center left and leftist parties decided to come together to present a true alternative to what they were, kind of suggesting individually. And it was so compelling that it knocked this nationalist right-wing party into third place by the end of all of it, which was unlooked for. Nobody was thinking that was possible, So that was really exciting. I'd be interested to see if the Democratic Party is open to something like this. My experience with watching the DNC is that it tends to make the more disappointing discussions and or decisions. I'm thinking about what they did with Bernie Sanders in 2016. I'm thinking about the fact that Biden is still, even now, insisting, that the most important thing is that he tried. He said in a recent interview, which is not the most important thing. So that's what a wife would say to her husband for sure. I think he was repeating what people have been saying to him, but that's on a personal level. The realities of this office and the conflicts that are very much active in the world at large. We need somebody who's on it. I trust Biden, okay? I mean, to an extent. I don't like his policies on Gaza and I don't and Israel, but and a number of other things, especially in his history. But it's definitely better than the alternative. I just think it's time for us to actually have an alternative. I want somebody to vote for instead of somebody to vote against. And so now it's a game of trying to see, is there potentially anybody's astrology that can show the hint of a rising star. I know for a fact Gavin Newsom is greasing wheels to make this happen for himself. He's showing up in advertisements across my Twitter feed, my Instagram, and he never was before. Before this debate performance, I never saw his name, and now he's everywhere, and he's answering all questions very diplomatically in interviews. And so he's the one that I'm watching in particular. But I say that because I put very little energy into this so far. I don't tend to like to get into U.S. Presidential themes until the candidates have been decided, because up until then, it's just too much work for too little reward, I think.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I definitely will keep my eye on that as well. Wade, I want to give you your flowers, man. I think that you were doing a phenomenal work at such a high level, man. I think that you're really at a great place where I can see what you're doing going beneath, going beyond where I believe where we are now, breaking the barriers in astrology and really going further. I can see you working at a high level, even with governments and different things like that. And I just want to give you your flowers and tell you that we appreciate the courage, the will that you have. I know it probably wasn't easy, because I know you were traveling you used to live overseas and in the United States, and just, all your life, all the traveling, just everything you went through to get to this place where you are now, all the ups and the downs, the valleys, the mountains, everything that you went through, brought you to this place, this place. They always say what doesn't kill you can only make you stronger. And
so right.
and all of the things that you've been through, the wisdom, the knowledge that you've gained thus far, we want to take our hat off to you and tell you that we admire you. We want to give you your flowers because you deserve it. I think that you're doing a phenomenal job, and what I'm really happy about is that I feel like you're just in the beginning. You haven't even got started yet. I feel like you haven't even really got to the place where what you're getting ready to do. I think there's so much ahead of you that I'm just, I'm going to hopefully be a part of to help you, you know what I'm saying, at some point.
If I'm ever having a bad day, I'm just going to call you.
but I do believe that, you are definitely on the forefront. Tell us about all of your things that you have coming up. Tell us how we can contact you, how we can join
Yeah.
the STA, how we can support Deborah Holdings magazine, how we can get involved with all of your stuff that you have going on.
Sure. So let's start with Skyscript. That's an easy one. So Skyscript is an amazing website where it's built by astrologers for astrologers. Really important in the day where everything seems to be AI generated and done with maybe very little care. This has a team, a number of people who have come together to build content for people who are interested in learning and studying reliable, good, strong astrology that connects back to traditional principles. So that's pretty amazing. It's in the process of being redeveloped right now, and so there's a members group that you can join at very reasonable rates. There's three different tiers, and you open yourself up to different rewards at every tier level to help fund this. So I just definitely want to suggest skyscript.co.uk, and you can scroll all the way down at the bottom, and you can see, become a supporting member, and there's so much great stuff in there. So that's how you can kind of connect with the work that Deb is doing at the moment. With the STA, lots of opportunities to connect there. Our website is sta.co, C-O, and we have courses on horary astrology. We have courses on astrological magic for those who are interested, and we have courses on chart calculation. In the future, there will also be courses on electional astrology and mundane astrology. We don't want to make any promises, but things have started in those directions. So I think it's fair to just say, the curriculum will be expanding. But the good stuff that you really want to get in there and study is going to be inside the horary course. And if you don't know chart calculation, or if you don't really feel very secure in astronomical precepts, you're going to want to take a look at the Astronomy for Astrologers program. That's a course that I've written, and I teach that once or twice a year. The next one that will be delivered online is going to be in January 2025, and the course is undergoing a whole series of revisions over the next few months, and so it will be a great one to join on board. If you've ever heard people talk about houses, for instance, and different ways to divide it, and you're like, I don't really know what you guys are talking about, or if you want to learn how to calculate a chart by hand, to prepare for, who knows, an impending apocalypse, right, where we don't have electricity or something like this, then come take this course. We'll teach you everything you need to know. The horary course is offered 3 times a year online, and then sometimes there are live deliveries. The horary course is delivered in English and Greek and Spanish and in Chinese. And so there's a lot of different options for those who would like to study. And at least 3 of those, Greek, Spanish, English, are available with online components. I believe the Chinese program is attendance in China, so I don't know how much I can speak on that. Or it could be I believe it's actually in Hong Kong, my apologies. So this is a course that is taught in Hong Kong in Chinese. Right. So yeah, if you're interested in studying horary, you've got the basics down, or you want to study astronomy, come find us at sta.co. And then if you're interested in a consultation with me, getting tutoring with me, or discussing shop in any capacity, you can find me at wadecaves.com, or email me hello@wadecaves.com. But that's pretty much it. Iskar, I also want to say that I think you deserve your flowers too. Your podcast is very engaging and a lot of fun. I loved the interviews that I've had the chance to listen to so far. Your energy is just so good-natured. It was so lovely meeting you this past year in the UK. Became an immediate fan. I just really appreciate how good-hearted and open and kind and generous you've been from the start. So thank you so much for inviting me to be here today, and I wish you every success on the development of this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it, man. One of the things I want to do, and I'll talk to you and Deb about, is I want to start working on promoting even more STA and, everything that you guys got going on with it. I think it's phenomenal. I think if you just go to the site, you guys have so much stuff on the site. I'll be on the site for hours. You guys got all the articles. The site by itself is phenomenal. So, I mean, those who are real lovers of astrology and really want to learn and really study, and definitely go to the site. And there's stuff on Benatti. They got there's stuff on everybody on there. And she,
Yeah. So on the STA site, there's a resources page that has a lot of good traditional text. But if you want to get lost for hours in a mixture of text plus modern articles, skyscript.co.uk is perfect for that.
So, like I said, we wanted to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule. We just wanted to give you your flowers, and we're looking forward to seeing the great things that are coming ahead, the great things that you're going to be getting involved in, just the opportunities, the articles, the classes, all of those things. We will be definitely joining your mailing list so that we can stay in touch and know everything that you guys have going on.
Yes, that'd be great. Mailing list, yes.
And conferences and so forth, because I think that what you're working on is something that's going to be absolutely phenomenal. And I think that I just wanted to be the one to just give you your flowers, and just let you know that we appreciate it, even though some people may not have told you that, or you may have not gotten a pat on the back yet, but us on the outside looking in, we appreciate and let you know that what you're doing is not in vain. We can see the major effects of what you're doing. And I'm sure Deborah probably has told you that as well, but you definitely have you've pushed the needle forward, and that's major. With everything that we have going on, with all the commercializing of astrology and all of those things, it's good to see people who are authentic, doing real authentic astrology, and who are pushing the needle, who are teaching, who are helping people to better themselves, to become the better versions of themselves, help them in whatever situation they need. And then also, this mundane thing that you're doing, I think that this is phenomenal, man. I mean, I just think that you're working on this thing, and you're pretty much mending and putting it together. And I think that this is going to be something that's going to be evolutionary. I just think that it's going to be.
I hope so. I'm going to just say it on this podcast to manifest it. My hope is that this grows, and it grows to a place where it gets to join with the other organizations and bodies in UAC. And I would really love an opportunity to help curate the mundane track and the mundane associated tracks for a UAC in the future. That's my goal. I would love to see that happen, but for right now, focusing more at home and just building something one stage at a time. So thank you for acknowledging it and for bringing attention to it.
Oh, no problem at all. And Wade, we just want to say this one thing: we love you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Oh, love you too. Thank you so much, ISAR.